Welcome in to Slaughterhouse and Rover Sports. We are here on Christmas Day. It's Spencer G. It's Bruce the Sports Doc.
Good to see you all today. Today we're talking about some broad strokes issues in the ever-changing world of college football, specifically college football playoffs. Lead us in without any further ado. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So, Bruce, when I look here at college football, we have the college football playoffs. So the first question I'm going to ask you is, what is the purpose of the college football playoffs?
We're going to alternate. We're going to do this in alternating fashion. I believe the overall purpose of the college football playoffs is to determine and crown a rightful champion, one who is the best in the land by the criteria of, in raw competition, actually winning the championship game. And I believe it should be at a neutral site. Let me throw it back to you from a different perspective. And I want us to go back and forth because the reason things are so complicated, ladies and gentlemen, is because there are different individuals with different perspectives, and that's why things are so chaotic.
Right.
So give me another purpose of the national college playoffs, and give me the perspective, please. Go ahead.
So I'll now come at it from the perspective of a TV executive. So a TV executive, their goal is to make the most amount of money, to create profit, and to do that, you need television viewers. You need people tuning into the product. So that is going to be the next kind of statement, is going to be the television creators or the TV executives. They're going to also have their hands on the wheel here.
Right. So to build on that statement, what television wants, television production and television revenues, they want something that is entertaining. They're creating entertainment, and they're more interested in entertainment than competition. So if we look at last weekend, all 4 games, none of the games were competitive. They were all blowouts. So they were competitive. So if there's a scale of entertainment on one side and then competitiveness on the other side, both teams competed in each venue. However, certain teams were just outmatched based on everything we'll be talking about. Because certain teams were outmatched, for instance, Indiana was outmatched, and SMU was outmatched, and even Tennessee was blown out and was outmatched. So, fact is, they tried their best. There was a level of competition, but there wasn't a lot of parity there. So it wasn't entertaining. And if we look at the ratings, we'll see that the regular ratings for the NFL during the same time period actually exceeded the ratings by ESPN, which ESPN paid $1.5 billion for the package. So obviously they're hoping to make up money this weekend. In these 4 games, it'll be competitive. Another thing you have to look at when we talk about the purpose of the playoffs is to decide how much does the regular season matter versus the playoffs. In the old days, the regular season mattered a lot. Regional rivalries mattered a lot. Conference rivalries mattered a lot. But guess what? Right now, there's conference realignment. So almost all of the juice, almost all the oranges are squeezed into the SEC and Big Ten. And that we'll get into. So as far as the purpose of the championship, that leads us into the ideal size of the championship. If the purpose is to identify 2 or 4 of the best teams, I think we could do that. If the purpose is to create entertainment, much like basketball, March Madness, where there's 64 teams and Cinderella teams, then that would require a larger field.
Well, with basketball, you have to factor in that there's injuries in the sport of in the sport of football. It's a physical, violent game, and that is why the least amount of games you're going to play. I believe that you can have a really good product because you can go full out for those games and you're not worried about getting injured. But the longer the season is, the more risk of injury. You look at Carson Beck. He got injured in the SEC championship game. Jordan Travis last year got hurt. So there's different factors there. My preferred size for a college football playoff is 8 teams. I think that 8 teams would be fine. I thought that 4 teams, you still were going to leave out some very worthy candidates. I would like there to be 3 rounds instead of 4 rounds.
Okay, and I don't think that's unreasonable. What I think that this current group, this kind of amalgam, if you'd like, of power in college football, mostly centered around the SEC, the Big Ten, and also the Big Four, and to a much lesser extent, the other people, what they call the Group of Five.
Group of Five, yes.
The Group of Five. Mm-hmm. So right now, this is an attempt when we gave buys to certain conference winners, particularly Boise State and Arizona State University. And because there's a lot of blowback. In fact, everybody's complaining about the format of the playoff. And they're going to complain more because I predict because of revenue, because of television, because of revenue going to conferences like the SEC, the Big Ten, it's about money. They're going to expand it. And they're going to expand it to 16.
Expand
but
the
I don't
playoff.
know. I think they're going to expand it so there won't be any buys. And in certain ways, it'll be more symmetric.
But then the problem is, like, say you're Alabama, you lose 3 games, then you're not going to be punished at all for not going to the playoffs. So then the regular season, you're just going to be judged on your playoff performance and not regular season ball. And then I believe that you'll have some guys, like say that a guy on Alabama, say a wide receiver, is like 80% can probably play or 70% can play in the Iron Bowl against Auburn the last week of the year. They used to be the biggest game of the season as the rivalry is Alabama-Auburn, the last game of the season. Minnesota-Wisconsin is another rivalry game. And if you have a lot of if you have the college football playoff expanding to 16 teams, there's so many teams. And then also there's a conference championship game that is already losing meaning. The conference championship weekend is then going to lose even more significant meaning, in my opinion.
I agree. My solution to that is to eliminate the conference championship games. They're redundant. In my opinion, you play a regular season. You play a number of games. And when you win your conference, and in certain instances, it's valuable. For instance, if you have 2 teams that have the same records, and they're on the bubble, and they're on let's say a Big 12 conference, then the game between BYU and ASU might have some meaning.
Right.
However, if you eliminate the conference championships and you funnel everything into 16 games, and especially if you eliminate those lesser ball games that nobody watches, and somehow because it is about money, and some of these are traditional bowls that have been around, but just have been swallowed up by the Orange Bowl, Peach Bowl, Fiesta Bowl. They're the big bowls. But if you could use some of those lesser bowls, like the Pop-Tarts Bowl, or like the Texas Oil Bowl, or whatever it is, and you could somehow create that as the first round of the group of 16, you could actually utilize those bowls. You actually fill those stadiums, and you'll actually make money, and you'll have eyeballs on it. So that's one potential solution. However, here is a question for you. Mm-hmm. How do we reemphasize rivalries? Again, this year, one of the best things about it, and I don't care who won, and I don't care, Michigan beating Ohio State in a regular season game. This is what made college football great for the last 5 decades. The fact that you have a rivalry, and a great rivalry, a lot of juice, and the fact that Michigan win took so much sting out of Ohio State. It pushed them to the back of the line where they had to play a play-in game against Tennessee where they annihilated them. And they're actually favored against Oregon.
Right.
So there's always going to be a discussion. And actually, that's what makes it great. part of the discussion as who deserves to be in and who's to be out.
Right. Listen, I understand that. I look at the playoff, and Bruce, I kind of wish it was 8 teams so that the regular season would matter a lot. I also look at, you know what, it probably has to be an even number of games, so there's a possibility that it could be 10 games.
Okay, so what I want to do is, I understand that. I don't want to overly dwell on the number of teams. That wasn't the intent of this.
No, I would shorten the regular season from 12 to 10 games.
Okay.
Because you get rid of the cupcake games. And plus, the calendar, college football should be ending around January 10th. That's when it should be ending.
Agree.
So then you can restart the new year. And as much as it's fun to kind of go on and complete it in, January 10th or complete it January 20th, I would like to see college football commence maybe on New Year's Day or right after New Year's Day.
I got it. So we're not going to be, I understand that. I agree with you that they should compress it down so there are not weeks between games. In fact, actually, the fact that there's a dead week this weekend and you're losing all the momentum, in my view, they should be playing them every week, just like the NFL does, but for the week before the Super Bowl. And so I agree with that. However, I want to get my focus on, as far as entering teams into the college football playoff, I want to talk about the actual ratings of the teams, weighting, the computer weightings, and also the human ratings, let's say 1 through 12. If you're rating 1 through 12 this year, South Carolina, Ole Miss, both of those teams would be in Alabama, of course. But instead, you're actually rewarding teams that had excellent regular seasons. And you're rewarding teams like BYU and Boise State. You could argue to a greater extent. So this is going to be a constant battle. If you're going to put in the best teams, you're always going to put in Alabama, Ole Miss, and luckily Notre Dame, of course, is an independent. They have their own pseudo-conference. But I'm throwing it to you. How do you balance rewarding teams that are deserving? That's the word, deserving, good records, the Indianas, the Boise States. How do you weigh that against raw ability?
Well, if you had a playoff structure, maybe you can allocate a structure where you have a certain number of SEC and Big Ten teams that are going to be allowed into the playoff each and every year that they'll agree upon. Because the SEC, it is more of a gauntlet than the Big Ten, than the Big 12. And it's more of a gauntlet because Oklahoma, Texas, they have more money for NIL. When you look at the NFL draft, the players that are getting drafted are from those schools. So the money and the players that are getting drafted to the NFL, they're bigger, they're faster, they're stronger athletes than the players at the smaller levels.
Okay, so that's something you have to figure out.
And it's hard to look at an 11-1 team and compare them to a 9-3 football team. But the thing is I would still reward an 11-1 team because of the way that they, completed their season. But it's going to create maybe unbalanced matchups, and that's really the age-old question. But Alabama this year, they still lost to Vanderbilt. Alabama got smoked by Oklahoma. Why should a team like that has those flaws? Alabama could have controlled beating Oklahoma. Oklahoma was the second to last game of their season. I think you should be peaking late in the year, and Alabama did not do that whatsoever.
I agree. And only scoring 3 points is egregious. I still can't figure out how that happened. And also, Oklahoma State getting boat raced by Michigan. And why is that? And again, we don't want to get into micro minutia. The reason is Ohio State was more intent on beating up their rival, running it, deviating from what made them great and how they boat raced Tennessee, the passing game. Their passing game, and they basically passed, and they used the run off the pass, and that is the way. And if they would have used that style even a little bit, they would have beaten Michigan.
Probably.
But it was more of a slugfest. And by doing that, and also I believe there's an inherent amount of pressure. I can't ignore the pressure on Ryan Day And I'm sure that he didn't prepare the same. And so the fact of the matter is you can look at Ole Miss. They had some terrible losses. They were very uneven. They're a good team. They would probably beat Boise State. I think they might even beat ASU. But the fact that they had terrible losses, South Carolina, incredibly uneven. And that's why these teams are on the outside. And that's why we're able to debate them at this time.
Absolutely. I mean, when you go 9-3, but, South Carolina, they lost to Ole Miss. They lost to Alabama, ironically, two of the teams that they were up against. And then LSU, they do have an exciting young quarterback. They did beat Clemson. They surged past A&M, so they really ended the season on a high note. I just believe that college football, you should have an 8-team playoff, and I still love rewarding the regular season. And the Alabama AD and these other teams, they've said it right, is that why should we schedule tough non-conference games when Indiana gets to play Charlotte, Florida Atlantic, and beat up on these teams and go 11-1? Notre Dame has an easier schedule. So you're going to minimalize outside conference games in the regular season. That's just what's going to happen.
Right. But there's another school of thought. If they're going to be tweaking it, there's a thing called nudge, you guys. You should watch it. There's a whole book on nudge. And nudging really is the way of the world in business. Now, they're going to be nudging it for sure. Now, if they nudge it to deal with strength of schedule, the fact that Alabama and a lot of these teams schedule their first 3 games as teams that could be high school teams, like the Washington Generals playing the Harlem Globetrotters. But if they play a stronger out-of-conference schedule, they get rewarded for it. I think you'll produce better competition, and you should be able to, again, you should be able to weight strength of schedule, and also should be some weighting for the caliber of the teams. And that's something we need to talk about. The last part in this segment, which is called the Ideal College Football Playoff Experience. We are Rover Sports. I'm Sports Doc Spencer G here, just to introduce you to us. You'll be seeing a lot more of us. If you like our channel, please subscribe to Slaughterhouse Sports. Subscribe to phillysportsdoc.com. And also log in to 97.5 HD2. And on Tuesday nights on the East from 7:30 to 8:30, you're going to go to www.dbam.com. And you're going to immerse yourself in our content. You're just seeing the beginnings of it. This is the infancy of, very simply, the infancy of something you guys are going to watch. It's going to be exciting content. It's going to include Spencer G. drilling deep. He's going to take you right to the high school level. He's going to take you to the recruitment where the coaches, where Bill Belichick actually goes into a small town in Mississippi and entertains a family. And they'll be shocked when they see him. When John Gruden eventually says, I think I'm going back to the NFL. That's a non sequitur. So the last point, the last topic you'll see is a question posed by one of our favorite viewers that you will all come to know, Lisa from Reading. Lisa from Reading asks, if there are, let's say 8 teams, we'll just say that arbitrarily, 8-team playoff, can the Cinderella team run the table and win? Can you see an NC State like you saw in basketball? Can a Villanova Wildcat team beat a Georgetown Hoyas basketball team with Patrick Ewing? A 1-in-100 team. Can it happen in college football? This is up for debate. You and I have divergent opinions. I'll let you go first.
So I believe it could happen. There was once upon a time a quarterback named Cam Newton, and he was able to put Auburn on his back, and they were able to win a college football national championship. I believe that an incredible quarterback, when you have a great quarterback, that's the great equalizer of college football. You look at Johnny Manziel, like he went into Alabama when A&M was in their infancy stages, and Johnny Manziel took Kevin Sumlin, and Kevin Sumlin, after Manziel left, he got fired and didn't really make anything of himself at Arizona, frankly. But Johnny Manziel was the difference that day. So sometimes you have magic football rosters. Like, say Boise State had on their roster a fourth-year quarterback that was absolutely magic, that played in the same system. Say that you have a brilliant coaching staff. In fact, Bruce, I know that this is the NFL, but Bill Belichick, you talked about the 1986 New York Giants, okay, and Bill Belichick was a defensive coordinator on that team, and then Bill Belichick also was the defensive coordinator, and the New York Giants were playing against the vaunted Buffalo Bills in 1990, and the Giants, Phil Simms got injured, so the Giants were with a backup quarterback and were double-digit favorites. But you know what ended up happening in that game? Bill Belichick devised a game plan and a scheme that didn't allow Jim Kelly to get going in that game. He said, we're going to allow Furman Thomas to try to beat us running the ball 40 times, but that clock's going to get rolling and we're not going to allow you to hit explosive plays. So great coaches and great quarterbacks can sometimes be the difference, can sometimes create those incredible, impeccable upsets. LSU was able to win with Coach Orgeron because of Joe Burrow. Sometimes these special forces meet, these special players come into the picture and create something truly, magical, Cinderella, you could say.
I'm going to pick up on that. Actually, you argued compellingly what I think is the best example of football teams grinding it out and actually winning a championship. And they would be those two New York Giants teams, especially the New York Giants teams that would start off with a wild card. So they had to win a wild card round, and they had to win 3 more games. And it was football, and they got worn down. But nonetheless, they prevailed. They prevailed with professional lines on both sides, the offensive, defensive side. They prevailed with Eli Manning and certain receivers like David Tyrell, who had a magical Super Bowl. Much like Nick Foles was able to outduel, well, I would say 1 out of 10 times the Eagles would have beaten that team with Tom Brady, where Tom Brady threw for 550 yards. But only that 1 of 10 times could Nick Foles, that one shining moment. He was like Butler or Howard University or one of those teams. But that is very rare. What I'm going to compellingly argue is that what we saw last weekend will be more the rule than the exception. The powerhouse teams, especially now with NIL and the transfer portal, the teams that have the horses up front and have the speed. Look at the Texas team with 2 100-yard runners. They played a team and totally housed their competition because they have professional lines, offensive and defensive lines. Quinn Ewers, who I think is a very good college quarterback, not exceptional. I don't project him to be an exceptional NFL quarterback. All right, I don't think he's going to be as good as Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders. But yet, in that system, I think that team is going to be dangerous. So as far as the summary...
Well, one thing I want to say is that when it was a 14 playoff, there were still blowouts. And the game of football can produce blowouts still. I would prefer a 3 rounds of this playoff. I think that there is such thing as playing too many games. I don't like the 17 games in the regular season, but I will admit that blowouts are going to happen. So SMU and Indiana, they deserve the right to be there. And the committee's job is not to just give you entertainment.
Correct. And one thing, I see a lot of people insulting the committee, and I'm no fan. I don't even know who the committee people are. But the fact is, they came up with a structure, and this committee adhered to the structure. They decided the 4 conference winners would be given preferential treatment, and they are. So you can't blame the committee for that. As far as the committee, they had a certain amount of discretion, and they made it clear, and right before the playoff selection, the week before, they made it clear to everybody that they were going to rate ASU, Arizona State University, at Boise State above Ole Miss, above Alabama, and above South Carolina. So you could argue with that. But at that point, the die was cast, and you can't fault the committee for the lack of competition. And you're right. We saw TCU get completely housed. You don't want professional wrestling. Professional wrestling is fake, all right? A lot of people like that. If your goal is to just entertain, then you'll create a scenario where both teams keep it close and it's fake. But you know what? That goes against the whole rule of competition, and I'm against it. That makes my skin crawl. If a team is going to roll and they're going to beat a team, then that's the way it should be. And it doesn't make it inherently bad. And lastly, I'm going to say, because I really want to weigh in and say, I think it's very unlikely that with a 16-team tournament, hard to say those words with a lot of alliteration, that you're not going to see a team like Indiana run the table. You're not going to do it. A team like Boise State or even ASU. The reason is because football isn't like basketball. It's just a different sport. You have to impose your will. You have to put your hands on the competition. And the chance of a smaller team with smaller players and slower players and at times less skilled players and it's players that may not be as coached as well. And whole brands that don't have the opportunity. University of Texas is professional. Alabama, professional. Oregon, professional. Boise State just doesn't have that. SMU doesn't have it. So I'm going to argue compellingly that it'll be very difficult for a Cinderella. In basketball, you've got basically, not to dwell on it because this is a football crowd, you've got a ball that could be shot in from three-point range by smaller people, less physically dominated people. And the Steph Currys, a team of 5 Steph Currys, could beat a team of Patrick Ewings. Where that does not happen in football typically.
It's very compelling. And if Indiana actually had like Michael Penix, who once upon a time went there, Indiana does play in the Big Ten. And just say Indiana actually had some NFL running backs, guess what would happen? Indiana might have beaten Ohio State. And if Indiana beats Ohio State, guess what we're saying about Indiana? They're not a Cinderella, they're a favorite, ironically. So
well, there's a lot that gets baked into
I'd
the
say
tape.
Boise State, you're absolutely right, and we could talk about this a lot, and we're going to continue this throughout other videos that we make, about the group of 5 level, and there are some compelling points to be made for sure. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's good to have one team in like Boise, just give them an opportunity. But yes, I don't expect maybe Boise State to win a national championship.
Every year will be different. Right now, things are changing. The dynamics of college football are changing. Everybody's weighing in. As just to summarize, what you want from a college playoff depends on your perspective. It depends on monetary investment. It depends on your alignment with certain schools, large and small. And this is a complicated algorithm. And as we go along, the combination, the Clash of Titans, Rover Sports and Slaughterhouse Sports, we'll be there to share that with you. I want you to be on the lookout for our next major video, which will be our fearless picks. We will be picking the next round, the final 8. And again, we're not telling you should bet your house on it, but just to give you a little teaser, we win more than we lose against the spread. And on that note, close us out.
Everybody have a wonderful evening. And I want everybody to take care, enjoy Merry Christmas, enjoy their holiday. And everybody, I just want you guys to spend time with family and enjoy.
And a Happy New Year to all. We wish you health and prosperity.
You have a better tagline than I do, which is from Rover Sports.
And I'm gonna
the lovely people of Slaughterhouse, clue them into the tagline.
I'm going to give you my tagline. To everybody out there, good night and good sports.